The St. Louis Cardinals are really something else, finding a way once again to come from behind and win on Tuesday in Baltimore. We'll talk about it coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It's Tuesday night, May 27th, 2025. Cardinals get back to their winning ways on Tuesday in Baltimore, 7-4 winners over the Orioles, as the Cardinals had to once again do it in come-from-behind fashion. And we are here to break it all down on B-Schaeff Daily, your daily St. Louis Cardinals podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're listening on YouTube and you would like to be notified of future St. Louis Cardinals podcasts on the daily right here from B-Schaeff Daily. And that'll be all season long. You can also follow us on Spotify as well. Just search B-Schaeff Daily on your favorite podcast platform. Tonight we're going to talk about the offense, really getting things going in the latter stages of this game. Once again, as the Cardinals have just had a knack lately for finding the come-from-behind win. And it's not always a game in which they trailed the whole way and they battle back. Tonight was the case that the Cardinals jumped out to an early lead, but in the middle innings, faltered, and the faltering came courtesy of Andre Pallante, who gave up an unfortunate 3-run home run there by Ryan O'Hearn in the 5th inning to put the Orioles ahead 4-3. But that has not been the type of moment that has caused the Cardinals to flinch in 2025. That's what's been so impressive about this Cardinals team, is that adversity will strike, and as long as they're within shouting distance, they're often going to find a way to flip the game back in their favor. It just seems like something they have done with some level of consistency this year, and it was the case again tonight as the Cardinals get a game-tying hit from Masyn Winn in the 7th inning, and then the 8th inning belonged to the St. Louis Cardinals as well, as we see key swings from not only Nolan Arenado, who hits a home run to put the Cardinals ahead, but you talk about insurance, Nolan Gorman with a hard-hit ball off the wall for a triple, kind of off the outfielder's glove, but it was a tough play in the gap, and Gorman correctly credited with a triple. And how about back-to-back triples from the two guys that are the poster poster boys for the runway efforts in St. Louis this year? Nolan Gorman, Jordan Walker, both tripling on back-to-back at-bats, helping the Cardinals to extend their lead. And a little bit later in the inning, Masyn Winn comes through once again, finding a way to add on a little bit more insurance as the Cardinals win it 7-4. We'll talk about the Pallante outing, maybe not finishing the way that it begun, but we did see some good things from Pallante tonight with the strikeout pitch working for him. He racked him up in this one. But really, it's about the Cardinals' resilience and the fact that this offense can find ways in the latter stages of games. You can never really count this Cardinals team out. We said it over the weekend, and we'll continue to say it here on B-Schaeff Daily, as they don't seem to be daunted by situations like we saw on Tuesday night. And it would have been perhaps easy to get dejected by a circumstance where you get up 3-0 early in a game and then your starting pitching falters. You give up a crushing 3-run homer. That's a death blow to some teams, but not the Cardinals. There was plenty of time to come back in this game. And that's also something that Oli Marmol was aware of as well. I want to spend some time in this episode talking about a key moment that took place in the top of the 6th inning after Alec Burleson led things off with a double and then was advanced to third base on a fly ball deep enough off the bat of Nolan Arenado to advance the runner to third. And you have that ideal scenario with a runner on third, tying run on third, mind you, less than 2 outs, and so the sacrifice fly would be in play, and a pitching change is made. Baltimore takes out their starting pitcher, Sugano, and brings in a lefty, Gregory Soto, for a key spot against Nolan Gorman, who was due up to bat for the Cardinals. He was in the lineup tonight, was originally in there, actually, as was Burleson, and it ended up being Brendan Donovan, who was scratched late due to hip tightness. We don't really know a whole heck of a lot more about that at this time, but we'll continue to monitor what's going on with Donovan, as the Cardinals they've been pretty healthy this year, but they can't seem to stay totally healthy all at the same time right now, as it was Contreras over the weekend dealing with the back spasms, and we didn't see him in that series against Arizona. He's now been back in the lineup, but Nolan Arenado, of course, was injured in that play that ended up with him recording a key out in that 9th inning on Sunday, crashing into the stands through the netting. So he was out of the lineup on Monday when the Cardinals lost 5-2 in Baltimore. And then he was back in the lineup tonight, but you lost Brendan Donovan. So the Cardinals have not quite been able to get all cylinders firing at the same time in terms of their position player health recently, but seemingly just some minor bumps and bruises for this club, and Cardinals are managing their way through that. And, of course, when you have guys that you want to get opportunities for that you haven't been able to see regularly, it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to make those adjustments and not push guys when they clearly need a day here and there. So it ends up that Jordan Walker was not originally in the lineup, but because of the ailment to Donovan, they shift things around and find him in there. Herrera takes the spot of Donovan in the 3-hole, slides him up a little bit, and Walker ends up sliding into the number 8 slot, and everybody else kind of shifts up just a little bit. But that's a bit of a relevant conversation to call attention to Donovan's ailment. I won't even call it an injury if they're talking about hip tightness, but hopefully that's all it ends up being. But I want to call attention to that because in the conversation of that top of the 6th inning, when you have a runner on third, there's one out, it's the tying run, you're down 4-3, and Nolan Gorman is due up to face a lefty Gregory Soto who throws breaking pitches. He's got the slider that he's going to make you chase low and away if you're a left-handed batter. And we know, after watching Nolan Gorman for a number of years here in St. Louis, that there is possibly no worse matchup for him on paper than a lefty who throws it from that arm angle and throws that type of off-speed stuff, breaking pitches that he's going to try to get a lefty batter to swing over the top of and throw him junk the entire at-bat. And that is basically exactly what happened. Nolan Gorman got up 2-0 and then offered at 3 pitches that were all out of the strike zone, low and away. Various degrees of low and away, but none of them were strikes. And in that moment, saw a lot of people on social media, Cardinals fans, basically saying, wrong call, Oli Marmol. Can't leave Nolan Gorman in to get eaten alive for that spot when you have a chance to tie the game with a sacrifice fly in the 6th inning. And I want to talk about that because I don't agree with the folks that say definitively 100% Nolan Gorman shouldn't be taking that at bat. You have got to remember, and I haven't heard the post game to know exactly what Oliver Marmol may have said about this, so I'm just going based on my own interpretations and understanding of the 2025 St. Louis Cardinals and the way that they are looking to handle things. You've got to remember what season this is. This is not the same year as any other year where the Cardinals are balls to the wall, have to win this game. I know that that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, and I'll leave room for interpretation that it's going to change as the Cardinals continue to win games and they continue to have a win pace right now that's greater than 90. The Cardinals are on a pace to win more than 90 games in 2025. And as you get into the month of June, the month of July, and you continue on this trajectory, very much so, the circumstances of the season will change. It won't be the same thing in June, or let's even say it won't be the same thing in July that it was in June, that it's been in May, or that it was in April. You're going to continue to adapt and change. But as we know, the Cardinals came into this season with a goal in mind to figure out what is Nolan Gorman definitively. And although we have seen some sample size of that over the past 3 years or so, 3+ years, there's this sense that it's time, in my opinion, it's this sense of finality where, like, we need to know, the Cardinals need to know, and they need to give him some unique opportunities to determine whether there's been growth for this player. Because we know what he's been, and what he has been a player that started out and showed the potential, right? And showed that there are some things about his game at the big league level that can be exciting. When you think back to 2022, Nolan Gorman had a 721 OPS. So really, I said 3 seasons. Really, it's been 3 prior to this year, and this is the 4th year where we are getting a significant dose of Nolan Gorman. He never really had any partial seasons, played 89 games as a rookie, a 22-year-old rookie in 2022. 313 plate appearances that year, hit 14 home runs in about a half a season, a little more than a half a season, and a 721 OPS, which was a 104 OPS plus back then. You know, had a low batting average for sure, low on-base percentage right at 300, but a slug of 420. I mean, this is a guy who was coming into the league, and he was designed to be a slugger. And in 2023, he was that for the Cardinals. 464 plate appearances, 27 home runs. Still a pretty low batting average at 236, but improved the on-base a little bit to 328, and the slug was impressive, 478 for an 805 OPS. He was 16% above league average. He was the player that the Cardinals wanted to see him be for the rest of his career. I mean, based on 2023, I'm not saying he was consistent that whole year, but that was one of the few things that we saw from that summer that you had maybe a chance to feel pretty good about was Nolan Gorman. Because as much as you had some down moments and he struck out 148 times that year, the power was proven by then. 27 homers in what was still kind of a partial season, 119 games played. You figure, man, roll that guy out there for 150-plus games, he's going to hit you 30-plus bombs, maybe even 35 or 40. Imagine if he continues to develop even further. That would be exciting. He did that for a whole season, had an 805 OPS. That was real. That happened. But then what happened? The league adjusted back to him in a big way last year, and he could not respond. Lost confidence, had to be sent to the minors for a spell. 19 home runs was still a decent number in 402 plate appearances, but we saw the batting average drop nearly below the Mendoza line. On base was down precipitously. Still slugged 400, so even then you had the makings of a guy who could put it together. He just needed to bounce back. He needed to readjust. The league adjusted to him. They said, hey, we can throw this guy junk, and he's going to swing at it, and we're going to mitigate the power that this player can attack us with. And it worked for the most part. And unfortunately, this year he's been even worse. In a year that was supposed to be about his runway and his opportunity, Nolan Gorman has not gotten off on the right foot. He's got just one home run and over 100 plate appearances. I mean, that is not the slugger that was promised. His slug sitting below 300, forget 400, below 300 starting earlier in the day today before Tuesday's game. So he's into the lineup after showing a little bit of promise on Monday, had a couple of hits and looked pretty good at the plate, looked improved at the plate. He's in this lineup even before the Donovan injury. Remember, he was in there. And it's the sixth inning of a game in which the Cardinals are trailing. But it's the sixth inning. There's one out in the sixth inning. What does that mean? He's 100% guaranteed to have that spot in the lineup come up again in this game. That was not going to be the last moment for Nolan Gorman at the plate, no matter what happened, right? The Cardinals could, right then and there, have everybody get out the rest of the game. Once he bats in that sixth inning, once his spot comes through, somehow you could have a fly ball, sacrifice fly, and he could get thrown out at the plate, the runner from third, Burleson. And you would still have the 7th, 8th, and 9th unfold in a way that ensures Nolan Gorman's going to bat. That spot will come up again in this game. You also have to consider the second base situation, although I don't think this is as big of a deal. I think Jose Barrero can perfectly capably come in and play second base, which ultimately he did do later in the game. So that was not a reason, but I just bring that up because Donovan was not available off your bench, in case people are like, well, just do it, bring in Donovan. Well, he was scratched, so he was not available. But ultimately, Barrero did end up coming in, so that's not a reason not to pinch hit for Gorman in a tough left-on-left matchup with a guy that throws from a three-quarter arm angle and throws predominantly sliders, which he fed a ton of them to Gorman. And it worked. Gorman strikes out. Walker comes up. Now the sacrifice fly is out of play. You're still trying to get that run home. Another guy who the Cardinals are trying to give runway to. It hasn't worked out where they've been able to get him in there every game. But when you have one injury to your lineup, it only takes the one, and that was Donovan tonight. So they're able to get Jordan Walker back in there. Great opportunity now for Walker, right? Runway. Let's see it. Well, he strikes out too. Unfortunate, but Cardinals fans are upset because they see a key opportunity with the tying run on third go by the wayside. Cardinals had a lead in this game. It felt like they were going to roll to a win, and then Pallante runs into trouble. Pallante goes back out there for the sixth, a little bit more danger to have to pitch around. He was still striking guys out. Pallante, I know the final box score was not great for him, and the walks are still going to frustrate you for sure. But he only gives up 3 earned runs, 4 total. Burleson has a throwing error. And look, Burleson is defensively, whether you put him at first, you put him in right field. He was originally scheduled to play right. The Donovan injury moves him to first base. But Burleson is a bat that you want in the lineup, and so it's going to be an error from time to time. Ends up costing the Cardinals an additional run and Pallante an additional run. But 5 2/3, 3 earned, 4 total runs against Pallante, 6 hits, the 3 walks. You don't like to see that, but it's been kind of a staple for him this season. And really the killer is the 3-run homer against O'Hearn. If you find a way to get around that one, maybe it's a completely different night the way we talk about Pallante, who struck out 7 in the game. But his ERA jumps a little bit from 4.18 to 4.23. For as many weeks as we talked about Michaelis being your number 5, Pallante looks more like your number 5 right now, but I still think he's somebody with upside for more. I understand we can be frustrated about why not McGreevy. Again, you could decide for a moment in time to swap the two, and I wouldn't have any major issue with it. But I think Pallante is somebody that you continue to invest in, and he's part of your rotation in 2026. We know that there are a lot of veterans on final years of contracts. We know that Sonny Gray is not locked in necessarily if he decides to request a trade between now and the beginning of next season. You're going to be looking at a lot of different starters that are coming in and new faces or potentially, prospects that graduate and are ready. But I don't think you can necessarily count on that. We've seen with the health of a lot of the AAA guys this year, it's been kind of a shaky ground that you're standing on. Pallante is somebody that I don't want the Cardinals to lose him by saying, we're going to cast you aside, we're going to send you down and bring up some fresh meat. You could do that, and you could do it with McGreevy. If you are targeting something specific in Pallante's game, I think you could do that. You could send him to AAA, and you could say, look, you're going to start 2-3 times down here, and then we're going to get you back up. You don't move him back to the bullpen because that was just not a good fit for him, in my opinion. Pallante would then sort of be the sixth starter ready to come up if there were any issues. If you wanted to make that argument, I'm not crazy about it, but I could absolutely see the argument that, hey, McGreevy has, waited enough, and Pallante, as much as he's not killing you, he's not hurting you, he's not necessarily been a too much of a net plus the last couple of outings. Although, don't forget, it was, just a few weeks ago that he was going into the 8th inning and shoving, and then had another 7-inning outing, allowing 2 runs. So he's had some good ones recently, hasn't had any terrible ones. And look, Eric Fetty, it's been one day since Eric Fetty gave up a 5 spot. Pallante didn't even do that. So I prefer laying off Pallante a little bit because, again, the Cardinals are winning games right now, and they're getting a performance requisite from their rotation that's giving them opportunities day after day to win these games. So I'm not overly concerned about that situation, but I just wanted to acknowledge the elephant in the room of hey, Michael McGreevy is still not here. I will still maintain that he starts a dozen or more times for the Cardinals in 2025. I just think he's eventually going to get his shot. And he will also be locked into a starting spot for 2026. If he's healthy, he's starting 30-plus games. That's just going to be the nature of it. And look at it this way. This is a year where the Cardinals are getting by right now without him. And it's not service time manipulation per se, because the Cardinals have a obvious starting 5 that they're going to, and even a 6th if you remember that Steven Matz was a starter earlier in the year. But it does kind of help, kind of buying an extra year of Michael McGreevy service time if they end up staying healthy in the rotation all year. That's not the goal. That's not why they're doing it this way with McGreevy. The why is look in their starting 5, and they're all capable, all with a 4.2 ERA or better. The one guy that people were harping on a long while was Miles Mikolas, and now he's got the second best ERA of the bunch. So go figure. They're just rolling along with what they have. And again, you're not taking anybody out of the rotation on a permanent basis because they don't have the minor league depth to, behind a McGreevy, be able to withstand multiple injuries right now. It's thin. Now, Quinn Matthews is rehabbing and he's on the way back up. That's a real positive. And Ting Kent's the same thing, but you got to give that some time. Let's get back into the Gorman talk, though. I kind of pivoted to a side quest about my interpretation of Pallante's outing. The other aspect of this Gorman play in the 6th inning, where he's in for that spot, it's an on-paper matchup that's a nightmare. I don't think Oliver Marmol was blind to that. But it's also the 6th inning where the spot's going to come up again. You're a little bit lean on infield depth as it is with the Brendan Donovan situation. And I think bigger than either of those reasons, it's 2025, and you're trying to figure out what the hell is Nolan Gorman, right? We've all seen him for 3 years prior to this one in those exact spots, and we can probably know before we see it happen what's going to happen. The Cardinals are no different. The Cardinals don't go into that spot thinking Nolan Gorman is definitely going to come through here. He's a changed guy, and this is the time. No, but they have to see it at some point. And of the runway guys on this Cardinals team, Gorman is probably the one that has had the least amount actually play out so far, and I think he's the one for whom they need the most to see what he is actually developing into and what he has become and what is he at this point. Because Walker's still just 23 years old. He turned 23 earlier this week. They're not giving up on Jordan Walker because of this year. Unless they're getting a really good piece for him in a trade, I don't think that this is the end of the hourglass sand running out on Jordan Walker. That could be the case for Gorman, though. And arguably it should be if this season doesn't turn around for him. But that's precisely why you have to see it in those spots. And I would make the case that you could hardly find a better spot to do it, where there's only one out. So, like, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, a lot of different ways for Gorman to get this run home. All he's got to do is put the ball in play. And look, goes up there. You're also evaluating his plate discipline, which is the biggest knock on his game. Can he recognize these sliders coming out of the three-quarter angle from Gregory Soto and lay off them? Pass the baton is okay there as well if the guy doesn't feed you a strike, which he did not. Clear scouting report on Gorman. Gorman loses the battle and was not able to overcome what we all know to be true about his scouting report. That doesn't mean that it was a failed endeavor, though, for the St. Louis Cardinals, because they're learning, okay, we're getting to see it with our eyes throughout the months of this season. It looks the same for Gorman. Why does that matter? Because it's sitting at home. Everybody would say, well, no, duh, it looks the same. He looks terrible in those spots. You can't send him up there against a lefty. Guess what? Same situation comes up in August when the Cardinals are 2 games out of first, 3 games out of first like they are right now. I'm telling you, they're going to do it differently because they're going to be in a race at that point where the Cardinals over the course of 4+ months will have proven their mettle, and you'll be able to say, hey, they're deserving. This team is deserving of you believing in them, of their manager having to go all out for every game. Right now, the season could still technically turn, and the Cardinals could end up a couple of weeks from now below 500 if they go on a real June swoon, and suddenly you're going, all right, back to runway, back to let's just use this season like we don't have it. We're not the team we hoped we were. We've seen it over a large enough sample. Let's play Gorman some more. Let's get Walker in there. Herrera, you get to catch more than you have been, and we're going to find out some of these things so that we're smarter about our roster come 2025. Or pardon me, come 2026, right? You're trying to learn in 25 what you're going to be in 26. Right now, you're still trying to do that, but you're doing it on the fly with a team that has playoff chops is the way that it looks. And so you're spending a little bit less of your time and effort and energy on the runway, but it's not completely gone. And Oliver Marmol said from day one this season, he said it in spring. I'm standing there when he said it, that, look, there are going to be times this season where you're going to look at a decision and go, what was that? Why'd you do that? That doesn't look like your atypical, your typical matchup on paper that you'd go for. And that's going to show up at times. He said it point blank, and he said, we're going to talk about it all year. I'm happy to have your questions about it. He's telling the media, but just know that this is coming. This is going to happen. So this was I think a prime example of that tonight, where you could hardly craft a better spot. You can't simulate these things for these players. You have to know, there are going to be moments where he's just playing baseball, right? That's most games. But then there's going to be these key spots where clearly this is a situational advantage for the other side, but we want to find out, what does Gorman do with it? And they found out. Unfortunately, the growth there doesn't seem to be happening. And look, there's going to come a point where they already knew this before the season, and they knew it before the at-bat tonight. They could have told you the likely outcome of that left-on-left situation, but to see it play out is the way that you ideally avoid the players that go somewhere else and they suddenly are different guys. You're going, wait a minute, we didn't see that version of him with the Cardinals. What happened? Right? The Cardinals are keen on that. They've seen that happen a time or two, and they're not necessarily fond of the trend. So this is a great year where the pressure was taken off at the beginning of the year. Now they're still going to try. Oli Marmol's still going to try to win, and then if they can force the issue and win enough, suddenly we're back in business when it comes to trying to be that playoff team and having a realistic shot to do so. But until you get a little bit later in the season to know that that's where you're at, and look, I think right now it's very clear the Cardinals are at that spot, but you have to prove it over more than just, 2 months. They've had 2 months of season. We're a third of the way through, a little more than a third after Tuesday. They'll have to prove it continuing going forward. But you want to find out those things about your individual players as well. And when you have a spot in the 6th inning when there's only one out, and so even in that inning, you might still score the run if Gorman doesn't come through. What better than having your 2 biggest runway candidates, Gorman and Walker, coming up with a chance to drive in the tying run? You got 2 cracks at it. You wouldn't have it any other way. You can't simulate something like that, so you love to see it play out just like that and know that you've got 3 more innings if it doesn't work out. So you haven't completely abandoned the idea of winning this game, but you're coming up with spots that you can't possibly simulate any better. I guess the only better way would have been if there was nobody out instead of 1 out for Gorman. But that's okay to have him go up and fail in that spot. The deeper into the season you go, the more you may see a pinch hitter for that situation. right? And I'm not going to make the excuse of the bench doesn't really have a lot of options, because you could have gone Pozo. You could have done a number of different things. You could have just had it be a straight swap for Barrero. I personally not very high on his bat. I think if you had a Luken Baker on your bench, does Oli consider it differently? Maybe, but probably not, because Pozo is that Luken Baker spot. As if you need a righty off the bench, you have to be willing to use him because you have 3 catchers. I've said it's fine to have 3 catchers because I really don't see it as a negative. It's a benefit for them to be able to use the bench more aggressively. Oli has generally not opted to use the bench more aggressively, but that's not a sign of, not knowing what you're doing as a manager. It's more to me about the guys who you'd be taking out of a game. That was a spot designed for Nolan Gorman, and he didn't come through. But guess what happened? I told you the bat was going to come for him in the game, right? His spot was coming back up, guaranteed. So after a Lars Nootbaar home run earlier helps to get things going, and that's really big to see from him. Post-game show yesterday, Joe Roderick on Sports of STL with me wanted to see Ivan Herrera become the new leadoff man for the Cardinals, just to try to do something different. Well, Lars Nootbaar probably not going anywhere anytime soon. On base 4 times tonight, 3 for 4, has a couple of RBIs with this home run. He scores a couple of runs. Great to see. The other power swing comes from Nolan Arenado in the 8th inning, puts the Cardinals ahead 5-4. And then remember those spots I said we're coming back up again. Nolan Gorman, now he's facing a righty, triple off the outfielder's glove in right center, hit the ball deep, hit it well, struck it well. Walker does it right after him. Back-to-back triples. Whatever you might have had on your parlay there, that would have been outrageous to say, yeah, those 2 guys are going to hit a triple tonight. That is exactly what you want to see from your runway guys. And this is still the game of baseball, let's not forget. The guys who are in the Hall of Fame are going to have a 300, 350 batting average. They're going to fail 65, 70% of the time. The ones that aren't in the Hall of Fame are going to fail even more often than that. But we saw both those guys who struck out in key spots a couple of innings earlier come through with key swings to help the insurance and the rally in the 8th inning. I just think that is notable. I think it's something that you're going to continue to see Oliver Marmol give these young players a chance to do so that the Cardinals can make their full evaluations. And as they continue to win, you'll continue to see more and more strategic baseball. But rest assured, it's not that Oliver Marmol doesn't know what the strategy is in that spot. It's that there's a bigger picture that I think Cardinals fans have got to keep in mind, and don't be so dang definitive with your criticism when there are other elements at play in 2025. You can let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, if you see where I'm coming from and where the Cardinals were coming from in this spot. But I think this was a prime example of the type of runway that we were warned back in February and March that we were going to see, and you're going to see it at fits and starts in certain spots of the year. This was an example, and for the Cardinals to still win the game, despite that runway moment not going the way you wanted it to, it probably went the way you predicted it would. That's still very notable to me. Let's take a quick moment, though, before we get out of here. Once again, let me know on the comments below what you thought about all of this. But I do want to go down on the farm before we get out of here for today's episode. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? Little bit weird to try to figure out what is actually going on here down on the farm, because the Springfield Cardinals, it appears, did not play today. I don't know. I believe that they were rained out, dealing with a lot of rain issues there. And so I'm looking, they were rained out. Makeup will come later this weekend, May 30th. So stay tuned for that with Springfield. And then I'm just pulling up the Memphis schedule, the AAA schedule results. And it doesn't appear they were even scheduled to play a game today, which is weird. I don't know if they knew the rain was in the area, but it says they played yesterday. I'm not 100% sure what's happening there, because I know they normally don't play on Mondays in the minors. But anyway, I'm going to tell you about the most recent result I see from Memphis, since we didn't have a show yesterday anyway. I was getting back from the family weekend up in Northeast Missouri. You may have saw my video post from the farm on Saturday, I think it was. But the Redbirds played the Durham Bulls 6-1. I think this was a game that played Monday, and the Memphis Redbirds got the win. Curtis Taylor, 29-year-old pitcher down there, has kind of come into the rotation out of necessity in recent weeks. Doing pretty well. 3 ERA, 6 strikeouts in 5 innings of scoreless baseball in his appearance on Monday. And Roderick Munoz, Mosqueda, and Riley O'Brien, finished up the game for the Redbirds. Roderick Munoz gave up 1 run but struck out 3. Mosqueda and O'Brien were scoreless in their inning plus of work for Mosqueda. And the lineup doing a nice job as Luken Baker hit a couple of home runs for the Redbirds. Michael Ciani, a couple of doubles, and Jimmy Crooks had 2 doubles as well. Luken is getting the average up a little bit. He's still just hitting 140 for the AAA squad, but the 743 OPS indicative of some home runs going in his direction, and so that is good to see from him. I don't think we've necessarily seen the last of Luken Baker because he could, find a way to get back with the Cardinals and, have some moments that make sense for him. So we will see what ends up happening there. I do have an update from a couple of days ago because we haven't done any down on the farm recently. Normally we just talk about AA, AAA, but did want to mention Quinn Matthews had his second rehab appearance, and it was with Palm Beach, and he looked very, very good once again. 3 innings, 2 hits allowed, no walks, no runs, 4 strikeouts on 45 pitches to get through 3 innings of work facing 11 batters. Good to see. I think hopefully the health will serve for him. Anytime you hear shoulder, it is certainly a concern, but hopefully that ends up not being the case as you're looking for a healthy Quinn Matthews. And Tink Hence, by the way, had another rehab assignment also with Palm Beach as he continues to work his way back. This was a little bit earlier Tuesday, if I'm reading this correctly. This is courtesy of Redbird Farmhands. I didn't pull up the Palm Beach stats, but he's got there on Twitter. 2 1/3, 3 hits allowed, no runs, couple of walks for Tink, so was working around some traffic, no earned runs in that ledger. So that's just me checking from Redbird Farmhands. Great Twitter account, by the way, if you want to check out what's going on with the minors. Has been putting up some cool graphics each and every day of what's been going on there. But the top 2 leagues, Springfield, Memphis, did not play on Tuesday. Got to get the rain out of the area, man. We got to get into the summertime. I was actually over at Carshield Field on Tuesday night watching the opener of the O'Fallon Hoots. Took my son there. If you're out in the O'Fallon area, that is some fun baseball, fun environment, and it was a packed house tonight. Charles Glenn, who used to do the anthem, longtime anthem singer for the Blues, sang the anthem tonight out in O'Fallon. So a lot of fun there. Let me know in the comments if you're a O'Fallon Hoots fan like myself. I got to get some more gear. I'll start wearing some O'Fallon Hoots hats, I think, on the streams and stuff once I buy some of those. So appreciate you guys. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. We'll continue to talk all things Cardinals baseball on this channel all summer long. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a moment. That's going to do it for this show. We will talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.